ahead and get started. Welcome to our webinar. Today we're going to be talking about a new funding opportunity for a body of work called From Campus to Career, Advancing Career-Connected High-Impact Practices. All right, so just some brief introductions. My name is Jasmine Haywood. I am a strategy director at Lumina Foundation. We also have my colleague, Rob Charette, who is a strategy officer as well. We are both on the Credentials of Value team, and we are the ones that are leading and designing this work. And then we have our friend, Tia McNair, a partner at Sova Solutions, and you'll hear more from her in a bit. All right, so this is our roadmap for this afternoon. We will talk a little bit about the premise of the work, what the work is focused on, why we decided to focus on this work, the details of the LOI that opened this past Monday, as well as things like eligibility criteria, timeline, and then we will be saving time towards the end for question and answer. Feel free as we are chatting to drop your questions in the Q&A box down below. Feel free to like any questions that you have as well so that we can get a sense of how to prioritize the questions. And we'll also share an email address at the end for any follow-up questions that anyone might have. Okay, so we wanted to start just by laying out Lumina's mission and vision. Earlier this year, Lumina announced a new goal, which is Goal 2040. This goal is that by 2040, 75% of adults in the U.S. labor market will have college degrees or other credentials of value that ultimately lead them to economic prosperity. So that was announced earlier this year. And we have hit the ground running with our work designed to achieve this goal for this strategic plan. Our vision is that we envision a system that is easy to navigate, delivers fair results, and meets the nation's need for talent through a broad range of credentials. And so when thinking about Lumina Foundation's new goal, new strategic plan, and the vision, one of the things that was important for our team, which is specifically focused on credentials of value at bachelor's degree granting institutions, is really thinking about what are some of the things that we're best poised as a funder to catalyze in the field to meet Lumina's 2040 goal. And so we've landed on career-connected HIPS as one of the many strategies that we'll be funding out of our portfolio. The premise is that when HIPS are connected to careers, connected to career pathways, they can serve as a central strategy for achieving the mission and vision that I mentioned. So what are high-impact practices? High-impact practices are very well known in the field. There's an established literature base for them. There's buy-in for high-impact practices in the field, and lots of foundational work. Much of which came out of my alma mater at Indiana University, led by Dr. George Koo. And there's different components of these high impact practices that I wanted to mention. So engagement, accessibility, interaction, reflection, and relevance. And so really thinking about all of these different components of high impact practices and the intentionality behind design, and how these high impact practices really contribute to student success and retention. So I mentioned design. One thing that is really important to us at Lumina Foundation is quality. And so in thinking about the quality of high impact practices, there's different dimensions that we want to take into account. So things like time on task and making sure students are receiving feedback, making sure students have space for reflection and integration, and other quality dimensions. With this body of work, what we are proposing to the field and hoping to incorporate in the quality dimensions of high impact practices is an alignment with workforce skills and competencies. Now, this is the dots are pretty clear to connect when it comes to a high impact practice like internship or service learning. The layer that we're introducing is that there should be integration with the skills and competencies that employers will eventually hire students for across all high impact practices. And so even for something like study abroad or student employment, which is more recently becoming codified as a high impact practice, we would like to push the field to make sure that the connections to career are clear and that this is all transparent to students. Oftentimes, students engage in these experiences, and it's not completely clear to them how they have acquired different skills and competencies that they can then articulate to employers. So with that, we are going to get into the meat and potatoes of this work, and I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Rob.
Thanks, Jasmine. Jasmine set the stage and the context for, in general, why we're interested in high impact practices. But now we're going to talk a little bit more about the actual grant opportunity, and why we're pursuing this and how we're going to pursue it. So, ultimately, we believe this work is not only an important mechanism for achieving Lumina's 2040 goal, but more than that, we believe that focusing on career-connected high-impact practices serves an important purpose when it comes to emphasizing student-centered approaches to student success, labor market alignment, and innovation. Here's a little visualization of the overall structure of the project. So what you can see is that we're going to have some cohorts of institutions that are organized into groups of 3 to 5 institutions that are going to participate as a community of practice together. And then ultimately, all institutions will serve as a larger community of practice as well. But ultimately, what's going to happen is that the intermediaries that are leading each of the cohorts will also tailor some technical assistance and provide some opportunities for institutions to access technical assistance. And Tia is going to talk a little more about that in detail in just a moment. But one thing I wanted to point out is that this overall structure that you see here kind of speaks to the additional benefits to participating in this grant opportunity beyond the direct funding. You can see that through the way this opportunity is structured, you will carry out the grant funded activities in the company of your peer institutions and experts in the field, and will have structured engagement opportunities to facilitate learning, both your own institution's learning and the fields more broadly, and support your own project implementation. And with that, I'm actually going to pass it over to our friend, Dr. Tia McNair, to talk about a little more about the intermediary's role.
Thanks so much, Rob. Thanks, Jasmine. We're going to go to the next slide, please. So, as Rob said, the selected intermediaries will have specific roles and responsibilities working with the institutions. And we put this in 3 key areas. institutional support and capacity building, implementation, monitoring and learning, and collaboration and dissemination. And as you can see from the bottom, the whole part and the functioning of this is for this to have strategic alignment across all three areas. So when we talk about institutional support and capacity building, the intermediaries will be focused on 3 to 5 selected institutions. They will support the implementation of a needs assessment. We will design this as something that is shared across all participating institutions because the goal is to meet your needs when it comes to the design, implementation, and assessment of career connected high impact practices. As Rob mentioned, and you heard Jasmine say as well, we want to match the institutions with the technical assistance that is provided outside of the grant funding that you will be receiving if you're selected to participate. We also want to facilitate feedback loops. This is a learning process. We want to make sure that we are learning from each other as intermediaries, as part of the Strategy Support Hub, but also across the institutional partners. We want to be able to think about the insights, we want to examine the barriers, and most importantly, the opportunities for scale. The implementation, monitoring, and learning is really focused on the intermediaries being advisors. They're there to observe. They're experts in the field. They're going to be there to flag risks and successes for you. And they also are really going to try to collect and synthesize that institutional learning and promising practices so that we can actually inform the field. We want this knowledge that we're gaining from this experience to actually advance the work on high impact practices. And the role that we're going to play as a strategy support hub, which we're going to talk about in just a few minutes, is to engage in this cross intermediary collaboration. We want to make sure that the intermediaries are providing support for you, but also learning from each other. Can we get to the next slide, please? So the Strategy Support Hub that SOVA has been selected to organize is, like I said, focused on strategic alignment, communication, and relationship management. We want to anticipate challenges. We want to anticipate opportunities that impact the work that you're going to be doing if you're selected for this project. We also want to make sure that we have the breadth and depth of TA providers that are going to meet your needs. And we are here to serve as strategic thought partners not only to the Lumina team, but also to you as well as the intermediaries. And as I already mentioned, we are going to develop a needs assessment. So you're not going to start from scratch. We know many of you are not. There's a definitely readiness that Jasmine is going to be talking about for this project. And then we're going to be talking about the learning capture, as I've already mentioned. So SOVA will play that role as being the leader of the Strategy Support Hub. So I am now going to turn it back over. There you go, Jasmine.
Thanks, Tia. So like Tia mentioned, we are going to be looking at a variety of different readiness indicators. I'm sure a question that a lot of you have is, what is Lumina looking for? What are you looking for in institutions that are applying for this opportunity? What you see here on the screen is not an exhaustive list, but I wanted to give you all some concrete examples as you think about responding to the letter of interest. So something like faculty engagement. When we think about high impact practices, we want to see that faculty are engaged in curricular design or redesign, that the curricular design is informed by labor market needs, or at least you're thinking about how to do that. A translation of learning outcomes into marketable skills, that there's connections between the learning outcomes in the curriculum and the skills and competencies that are valued by employers, that you've either started to do that work or you have buy-in and momentum to start to do that work. There's also data use. So we might be looking for something like an institution that has demonstrated the use of labor market data when doing their work and putting together curriculum and courses and programs. We also will be looking for de-siloed cross-functional teams that have history and authority to implement changes based on data collection and analysis. When it comes to employers and workforce partnerships, one of the things we'll be looking for is that there are some authentic partnerships that have already been developed and created, and that there's an interest to carry those partnerships over into curricular integration. If you are really an overachiever and really far down and deep into doing this work, you might have something like faculty externships. That's part of your institution and part of the practice for the faculty there, where faculty go and get direct industry exposure while also teaching students and informing the curriculum. We'll also be looking for data disaggregation. That'll be important to really ensure that high impact practices are accessible to all students, all student populations. And so in order to do data disaggregation, you have to actually be collecting the data and have some sort of data infrastructure and feedback loop so that you are able to do that data analysis to have a sense of who's participating in HIPs, who has access to them, and what are the outcomes. The last thing I want to mention is institutional leadership and alignment. We really want to see that there is buy-in for this work, that there's support at the top, so to speak, that there's a readiness, that things like career preparation and employment outcomes are tied to the mission and values of the institution. And so that is another thing that we will be looking for. I do also want to say that when we started this portfolio at the beginning of the year, the first thing we did was bring together a group of experts, our Credentials of Value Advisory Board, and they served as a sounding board, critical friends, thought partners, as we put together our broader portfolio of work and this LOI specifically. At the beginning of this webinar, we asked you all a question via a poll to gauge where, do a little bit of a self-assessment on where you might be when it comes to high impact practices and specifically career connected high impact practices. And so we're going to show those poll results right now. And so we've got a good percentage of you that are in the middle. You're chopping the veggies, you're simmering nicely. Some as well that are still reading the recipe, which is okay. And then we've got 4% that say they are 5-star Michelin ready. They've got their signature dish. So thank you all for engaging in that poll. This is just a nice, quick, fun way to see where the field is, where you all are in doing this work. And the hope here really is, as an outcome of this work, that high impact practices are better connected to careers and that ultimately students have better employment outcomes once we do that. All right, so I am going to pass it over to Rob to talk more specifically about the funding.
Yeah, so this is the fun part, talking about some of the logistics and technical details of this. We just wanted to make sure that you all had a level of awareness up front about what the funding can be used for. And so you can see here some of those points, and I just wanted to maybe highlight one in particular, which is the direct financial aid to students. Lumina Foundation grants cannot be used for scholarships or anything that could be interpreted as financial aid to students. Students can be paid to do work and things like that, but if in terms of scholarships and financial aid, that's one that we just like to make sure that you all are aware of up front. But for the most part, anything that you're going to be doing around capacity building, the data capacity that Jasmine had mentioned, All that is fair game. And so you all will get more details about this. For example, if you're selected to advance to the next phase of the process, which would be participating in the full request for proposals, you'll have more information about this as you develop your budget. Wanted to make sure too that you all were aware of the eligibility criteria, and really just a couple of things to mention here is that this is a grant opportunity for bachelor's degree granting institutions. However, bachelor's degree granting community colleges are not eligible for this particular grant opportunity. So just institutions that are primarily considered four-year universities. Otherwise, you can see these are some of the ways that we're going to be assessing, using some of those readiness factors to assess whether or not institutions will receive an invitation to submit a full proposal. And then just to say that their priority consideration will be given to ASCU member institutions, Seal of Excellencia certified institutions, and public or private HBCUs. All right, I wanted to just give you a little preview of what it's going to look like when you actually navigate to the application portal. And we're going to put a link to the application, what you'll see here in the chat, so that you have this. Again, you'll get all this information when we send the follow-up as well. But this is what it's actually going to look like when you arrive at the submittable portal, which is where you will submit your initial letter of interest. There are actually two RFPs open with Lumina Foundation right now, which you can see on the right-hand side of the screen there. So just make sure, I mean, if your institution is submitting it to the other one, great. Good luck for that one as well. But for this particular opportunity, just to make sure you know, it is going to be the second listed on the screen if you arrive at that landing page. So you'll want to make sure you click on the correct RFP. Then just to give you a sense of the timeline here. So technically the letter of interest application opened on Monday. We are going to close the application deadline on October 24th, 11:59 PT. So you all on the East Coast, get a few extra hours to submit if you need to. But at that point, and you'll see it's a fairly short letter of interest application. There's some questions about your institutional type and sort of like rating your level of readiness for some things. But then there's 3 prompts, and they're actually word count limited. So we're trying to have you all be as brief as possible in this initial letter of interest, but still have the ability to kind of describe your level of readiness and your interest in this opportunity. So October 24th is when the deadline will be for that submission. We're going to do an internal review, and our goal is to reach out to applicants on November 3rd if they're going to be invited to submit a full proposal. At that point, those institutions will have another 2 weeks to submit the full grant proposal. And then at that point, we'll have another series of internal reviews. And our goal really is before the winter holiday break to notify campuses if they're going to be receiving the grant for this opportunity. Our grant management process in terms of executing the grant agreement will take a little time. So we're ultimately hoping that in the new year, early on in the new year, hopefully March, we'll be able to actually do a public announcement of who has received the awards. And so that is the timeline. Wanted to mention that, oh, sorry, I'm going to have to go back, pressed too many times. That in addition to the application portal that we put a link to in the chat, we're also going to put a link to the web page, the landing page on the Lumina Foundation website, which also has some more information on there. So for example, we'll post the recording of this webinar there in addition to sending it out to you all afterwards. There's an explainer video. There's a link to the application portal. There's a blog written by our wonderful Dr. Jasmine Haywood there that provides some inspiration for this work. So just know that you can also access a lot of this information on that landing page at your own leisure.
All right. Thank you, Rob. So that is our presentation portion. We are now going to shift over to Q&A. We dropped the link for the landing page for this body of work into the chat. You can see that that was the last link that was shared there. On that page, you will find some of the answers to your questions like eligibility criteria, a link to submit a LOI, a timeline, and a few others. We're going to answer a few questions live. We did have already answered a few in the Q&A box there. If you click on the middle answered tab, you'll be able to scroll through and see some of the answers thus far. I am going to answer just some high-level quick questions first, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tia to answer a few as well. So first on eligibility criteria, I see we have some questions on that. And I will actually go back to our slide that is focused on eligibility criteria. So bachelor's degree granting colleges or universities in the United States and its territories. We unfortunately will not be able to accept applicants from community college, baccalaureate, or dual mission institutions. Priority consideration given to institutions that are affiliated with those mentioned at the bottom there, ASCII member institutions or regional publics, Seal of Excellencia certified institutions, as well as public or private HBCUs. Okay, Tia, I know you have a few questions you want to answer.
Yes, there are some that are more for me and then definitely for you and Rob. So there's one that was the very first one that we received, talked about a specific skills taxonomy or framework being applied here. There isn't one in particular. It all depends on the employer needs, and it also depends on the way that the curriculum, how that is designed. So there's nothing that's saying that you have to fall within this one particular basket of the skills that you are advancing through the design and implementation of career connected high impact practices. But will those skill sets need to be specifically defined? Yes. Yes, because that's part of the assessment process. But they will vary depending on your institutional priorities related to your learning outcomes, but also to the skill sets and competencies within your state, within your locale, within your region. So there's another one about the funding. I want to go to this one, Jasmine and Rob. Can funding be used for personnel, student workers, faculty, staff stipends as incentives?
So the funding can be used, I have a slide somewhere. Here we go. It can be used on, FTE for faculty and staff. It cannot be used for something like student scholarship or something like, paying a student hourly for an internship. Unfortunately, our funding can't be used for those. You can see the list here as well as other categories that the funding is not allowable for. I also wanted to touch on a question related to the duration of the grants. So the grant period will be more or less 2 years. And so as Rob previously mentioned, there are also, in addition to the direct funding to institutions, there will also be other non-financial benefits, like receiving technical assistance from the intermediaries. There will be a technical assistance wallet that is parked with the intermediaries that institutions can tap into for some tailored help and support. So essentially, in the same way that we advocate for wraparound supports for our students, we have attempted to do that for the grantees as well, so that there's different levels of support the institutions can tap into.
There is a question about, should LOIs focus on the entire institutional infrastructure, or can they focus on specific units that manage career-connected HIP programming?
So I need to know more. I'll say that what we are looking for in institutions applying for this is not high impact practices that are isolated in specific majors or a program, but institutions that are ready to scale them beyond that, whether that is scaling to a school or a college of education, for example, or scaling institution wide. We'd be open to either. But we are looking, those are some of the things that we're looking for. I hope that helps. I saw there was also a question on systems versus individual institutions. I started to type answer. This particular opportunity is only for institutions, individual institutions, colleges, or universities. We hope to be able to do this work with systems in the future, but this opportunity is just for individual institutions.
Okay, so that answered a couple of the questions there. And we did this one. How will communities of practice be selected? Will they be selected based on the content of their proposal or based on institution size? And I think you've already addressed that, but I didn't know if you want to say anything else about why we're focusing on communities of practice as part of the key learnings for this.
Yeah, so this was really informed by past work that we've done. We have seen that when institutions are engaged in doing this work alongside peer institutions, the work is better. And when a space is created for some peer consultations, for learning about whether it's how to cultivate buy-in, how to redesign curriculum, or how to do implementation of career-connected high-impact practices, the work is better. And then our intermediaries will be there to facilitate that alongside of SOPA.
Great, thank you. There are some questions still related to the priority considerations, but before we do that, again, to give you the opportunity to reiterate that, can we also talk about, can only one proposal be per campus be submitted?
Yes, good question. One proposal per campus, please. If we do, and this happens, if we do receive more than one proposal for a campus, we will ask you to talk to each other and send us back one proposal. So
Yes.
yes.
So can we address the priority consideration? We have multiple questions about that, Jasmine and Rob. And what if
Sure.
you're not an ASCU member or you're not a Seal of Excellencia institution?
So the funding opportunity is open to all bachelor's degree granting institutions, four-year institutions, period. And then priority consideration is given to those three institutional affiliations that we mentioned. That does not mean that if you're an HSI that is not SEAL certified, you can't apply. That doesn't mean if you're a religiously affiliated four-year institution, you can't apply. You are still eligible to apply. We just mentioned that those are the priority considerations.
Great, thank you. And can we just clarify one more time the funding amount and over how many years?
It'll be about 2 years, and it will be between 80 and 100,000. And that'll
Okay,
that'll vary really based on the responses, proposals we get, and the content in them.
okay, great. And Rob, there's a question about the LOI and submittable, the landing page. So it, I do believe it's up and ready. So do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sorry, Tia. What was the question about specifically?
The LOI questions that are in submittable, that is
Sure.
up and ready.
Yep. Let me just pull it up real quick so I can I'll give you the preview of exactly what the questions are.
And the link for that was also posted previously. If you see the link under application portal.
Yeah. Yep. So you can definitely go there and see it now, but I'll say that there are 3 prompts that require the open-ended questions too. The first one is asking for you to explain how career-connected HIPS align with your institution's mission, strategic plan, and/or goals for workforce readiness and student success. That's the first prompt. The second one is for you to briefly describe the campus infrastructure for implementing career-connected high-impact practices, for example, professional development, cross-campus partnerships, data collection, utilization, employer engagement, technology, etc. That's the second prompt. And the final prompt is for you to provide a brief summary that describes how grant funding could support further innovation and scaling of career-connected HIPS at your institution. So those are the 3 prompts that you'll be required to answer in the initial LOI.
Great, thank you. Here's another question. Someone says, I know in the past, Elizabeth said this actually, I know in the past you wanted projects to impact specific demographics of students. Is that the case here? Can we just reiterate that?
Hi, Elizabeth. Yes. So, as part of part of Lumina's work and focus, we want to make sure that when it comes to access and outcomes, all students have, an equal opportunity. In this case, around career connected HIPS, to both engage with them, access them, and also that we're seeing the results of that in the outcomes. And so that's why things like data collection and data disaggregation are going to be important in this work.
Thank you. And can I just remind everyone that we have a lot of people, a lot of institutions represented on this webinar. And if we are trying our best to get to as many questions as possible, but if you look through the Q&A and you see a question that you want to upvote, please do that, because we're going in order as the questions are received, and we want to make sure that we deal with the most pressing questions.
I wanted to
Okay.
respond to Kara's revised question here because I think it's a good one. So Kara is asking if this opportunity is about advancing career-oriented HIPS or deepening the integration of career competencies in HIPS, or both. Excellent question. And the answer is the latter. So this is not about, okay, let's double down and focus on internships, although that is a good thing for students to have. This is about when we look at high impact practices in their entirety, all that we know about high impact practices and all the practices that are comprised in that and considered HIPS. How do we take it to the next level and ensure that all of these HIPS are connected to the skills and competencies that employers will be looking for when they are hiring our students? And so that cuts across all high impact practices. We would love, and we are open to, I know from past work I funded, that there are institutions and systems that have done work codifying new high impact practices like student employment, for example. And we would be open to receiving responses that are focused on things like student employment as well.
Great, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about the institutional teams and the composition of those. Do you have any recommendation? Because people are saying, is it institutional level teams or career services teams?
I would say both. That will be specified for those that are invited to submit a full grant proposal. So yeah, a breadcrumb for all of you that we will be looking for cross institutional teams. That is important to the institutionalization of the work, to the sustainability of the work, and ultimately the success of the work. We don't want to see that this is isolated to one corner of an institution, but rather that there is a mix of people. We likely won't specify, you have to have this person with this title on your team, but we do want to see that this is an institutional, cross-disciplinary, cross-institution effort. And part of that should involve career service. It should not exclusively be career services staff, but they should absolutely, show up on the roster.
Great, thank you, Jasmine. There's another question about there are many HIPs, including first year experiences and common intellectual experiences like general education pathways. Are any of these HIPs open for the design work proposed in the project?
Yes.
That's it. It was a
That's
quick
the
answer.
Yeah.
It was outvoted by 5.
I also saw a couple of questions about whether or not the opportunity is limited to particular industries or majors. And so, Jasmine, I just wanted to raise that up to see if you could just make the point about kind of like how we're envisioning what sort of industries and programs are eligible.
Yeah, so we're industry and major agnostic. This does not need to just live in your STEM departments, for example. I would say more so than discipline, major, or industry, we are looking for institutions that have already laid the foundation for this work, that have rolled their sleeves up, that they've moved past reading the recipe, so to speak, like we mentioned earlier. They are ready to take this work to the next level and ensure that the high impact practices are designed with careers in mind and connected to career pathways.
Great. Okay, some of these we're going through. Is there a clear definition and expectation for capacity building? And I can answer that if you want me to.
I'd love for you to weigh in, Tia. We don't have a clear definition. I something like capacity building. I don't know, I've been funding work for 8 years, and what I found that it's not helpful to have a rigid definition of that, because it tends to be very institutional context dependent. And so building your capacity at, a small liberal arts institution might look different than building your capacity at, a large public, for example. But what would you add, Tia?
The needs assessment, and I was just going to reiterate that's one of the reasons why that is such a core part of the onboarding for the institution, so that we can identify the specific needs that are tailored toward an institution or a community of practice. So just wanted to add that, but yeah.
Yeah, and related to that, I see we have questions related to the technical assistance. The needs assessment will also help SOVA, in partnership with the intermediaries, identify and tailor the technical assistance that is provided to the institutions. That'll be a collaborative process. For example, there may be a group of institutions that have perhaps the same particular technical assistance need. And so, we'll try to be efficient with how we roll that out and how we provide that to institutions. Ultimately, our goal with the technical assistance is one, to be responsive and quickly provide some of that tailored support. And two, to be specific, to give you exactly what you need to do this work and build your capacity to make the work better.
Mhm. Okay. What I'm seeing is several of these, as Rob mentioned and Jasmine mentioned before, several of these questions have been answered. If you want to look in the answered questions that have responses, and then I don't know, Rob and Jasmine, if you want to talk about the FAQ page that is going to be going up while we're looking.
Yes, so we will on the link that was previously shared that ends in CC HIPS. That is where we will be posting both the recording of this webinar, the slide deck that we presented today, as well as we'll be creating a list of FAQs for you all to refer back to share. And so you will see that uploaded in the next week or two. Likewise, in about 2 weeks or so, we will announce who the intermediaries are on that page. So feel free to check back. And if you're curious, I saw there were some questions about whether or not they've been identified or if there will be a separate RFP for them. They have been identified and they'll be announced on that page in about 2 weeks. So you feel free to check back on that.
Okay. There are some lots of questions or upvotes on the allowable expenditures. They say, can you provide any additional clarity? Maybe if we go back to that page, if we can on the slides, on what exact allowable expenses would be.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
what we will do is address that in the FAQ page as well. We'll be sure to get the exact language from our grants management team regarding allowable expenses. But
Yeah, and
go
just
ahead, Rob.
yeah, I was just gonna say there are a number of questions in there about like specific uses of the funding and whether or not it's allowable, and I think generally the answer is it probably is allowable if it doesn't, violate any of these what cannot be funded. But the thing I'd like to point out is that just because it's allowable doesn't mean it will necessarily be perceived as a good idea by the selection committee, right? So if you're, proposing to use things for, certain purposes that are viewed by the selection committee as not sustainable, or not really kind of living, carrying out the purpose of and the intention of the work, then that's going to be the more important thing, not necessarily whether or not it's allowable. Because again, like these general categories here are what are going to be the limitations. But just to say it's a little more subjective in terms of whether or not the selection committee reviews that use of funds to actually be a good idea in order to, advance, in a sustainable way, the career connected HIPS at your institution.
Yeah, and I should say on the left with the red of what's not allowable, that is an exhaustive list. On the right, that is not an exhaustive list. So I don't want anyone to feel like you need to box yourself into those 4 check marks there. Those are suggestions, but there could potentially be lots of other ideas of how to make sure the high impact practices at your institution are better connected to careers.
Great. So Jasmine and Rob, can you restate how many grants you're anticipating to make?
It will be somewhere between 13 to 15 grants directly to institutions, ranging in amount from $80,000 to $100,000 over the course of 2 years.
Thank you. And who can serve as PI, for example? Who is the best person to serve as a PI?
So we will not micromanage who you think is best to serve as PI. I think it should be someone that has the leadership authority to at some institutions it might be the vice provost, at some institutions. It will depend. Again, that's another thing that is very dependent based on institutional context and hierarchy and org charts. And so what I will say is that it should be someone that has the history, the knowledge, the authority to lead work like this and to convene a cross-institutional team. So those are the things that I would consider. I see there's questions also about working in the submittable portal, and did want to let you all know you can log in and access the LOI and see and preview the questions and come back to it and start to work on it, come back, preview them and come back. So feel free to do that if that's helpful for you.
Okay. Back to, are you working with a specific list or set of activities that count as a HIP, as a high impact practice? In other words, what are you saying a HIP is?
So again, we are open, there. So if I would say go and on the National Survey of Student Engagement's website, we've worked with them in the past and we'll continue to work with them on what they codify as a high impact practice. That being said, like I mentioned earlier, we are also open to institutions that have really done the work to codify additional high impact practices. We are more concerned with the quality and the design of the high impact practice. If that makes sense, we want to see that the quality dimensions are there. I can go back to the slide that lists all of them. We want to see that the design is intentional, that these quality dimensions are part of the engaging experience that students go through. So for us, it's more about the design and the quality and less about the practice itself, if that makes sense. So if an institution is making a case that they have codified a high impact practice that includes all of these dimensions already, then that indicates to us that they are then ready, if they have not already begun, to introduce that layer of how do we connect the dots between HIP's outcomes and the skills and competencies that employers are looking for.
Great. Well, oh, hold on a second. Okay, they asked about the clarification of the one application per campus. You've said that one application per campus.
Yes.
Okay. Are for-profit colleges eligible?
Yes. Also wanted to, I see some questions about more technical questions and questions about submittable. So I'm going to go to the timeline here. So as a reminder, the LOI applications opened on Monday. You can preview them right now if you log into Submittable. As far as who has access, who can log in, when you go in and start an app, and I'm going to ask Rob to chime in here, but when you go in and start an application in Submittable, you can choose who is working on that application with you. You can designate. So if you've got a grants management person and an advancement person that you're working collaboratively with to put together the LOI response, you can put their names and emails in there and everyone will have access to the same application. So I would just say, make sure you coordinate who is going to hit submit and by when, but that technology does allow for you all to work collaboratively.
Yep, and to save as you go.
Right.
And as we're coming up towards the end, another question came up from Vanessa. Will the recording be available after today or only the slides? if you want to restate.
Yes, recording and slides will be posted on the landing page for this that was previously shared. They will also be sent out via email to everyone that was registered for this webinar. I see quickly there's a question about reporting requirements for institutional grantees. We will require an interim report and a final report for all institutional grantees. The interim will occur halfway through the grant period, and the final report is due 2 months after the grant ending date.
Okay, it seems as if we've hit a lot of these. We've had the opportunity to answer a lot of these questions.
Yeah, and again, Tia, just to say to the group, we'll be digging into the Q&A to help craft the FAQ tab that will ultimately end up on that landing page, the Lumina Foundation website, in the coming days.
Yeah. And the one last question maybe, and this is the reporting requirements for grantees. If you wanted to say anything about Lumina's reporting requirements.
Yes, interim reports and final reports will be the reporting requirements. So I think we will wrap there. We are going to share out we already did shared out the landing page again for this body of work. I would encourage you all to just spend some time and read through that. There's lots of details and answers that we discussed there, that we discussed today, that are there on that webpage. Like I said, feel free to check back for the announcement of the intermediaries as well as other details. We will send out the recording and the slide deck to all that have registered for this webinar as well. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us at the email address that is listed there in the chat, cchips@luminafoundation.org, and Rob or myself will be happy to answer your questions. Thank you all for joining us today. We are excited about the energy around this work and looking forward to reading the responses to the letter of interest request. So thank you, and I hope you all have a great afternoon.